When a new computing or gaming system launches, there's always the question about its killer app. One which not only shows off what the platform can do, but also serves to throw down the gauntlet to challenge others to do their best as well. When the first batch of SpecNexts reached their owners' doorsteps in 2020, the standouts were obvious. Rusty Pixel's trio of games, Baggers in Space, Tyvarian and Warhawk. Back then, I covered Tyvarian as I felt it got the least attention out of the three. Now though, it's time to look at another of the trio, specifically Warhawk, which is not only my favourite one of the bunch, but also one which offers a unique through-line to boot, thanks to its origins on the Commodore 64. Warhawk was originally released on the Commodore 64 way back in 1986, being developed by Proteus Developments and published on Telecomsoft's Firebird label. There's no real story here with this one, other than being tasked with taking your Warhawk fighter into the asteroid belt and clearing out all 9 of the enemy's bases. I'd say it's for the best though. Warhawk takes plenty of cues from Tekkan's Star Force, but with enough small twists to help it stand out amongst the crowd. The most obvious is with your ship, as you've only got a single life here. A single hit won't end your run though, as you've got an energy bar which slowly depletes as you take damage. Be warned though, there's no invincibility frames here, so an unwary player can lose a lot of energy in no short order. You want to keep as much of it as possible, as it's a major source of bonus points at the end of each stage. That bonus is joined by 2 more, an increasing level completion bonus, and a third base destruction bonus. That's earned by taking out all the destructible objects in the stage. It might sound easy early on, but doing so on the later levels, with everything going on screen, might be just a heck of a challenge. Where Warhawk goes for something different from Star Force is how things are handled once you get to the end of the stage. Warhawk simplifies things by throwing a horde of enemy craft your way, instead of taking on a large base ship. The thing is though, that wasn't the original plan. Thanks to the magic of archiving, an earlier release of Warhawk, back when it was titled Proteus, is available, and this does feature a large Star Force style ship to destroy at the end of the stages. Unsurprisingly, this got changed once it had been signed to Telecomsoft, as they were a tad nervous with how close this was to the original arcade game, and there had been hits here or there with other games that, got legal trouble as a result. Though these battles are tougher than what's present in the final game, I'm still glad it's available for us to play and enjoy, especially if you want that extra challenge. Warhawk's final trick comes a few stages in. Amongst the cacophony of enemy assaults, you'll occasionally see a lone craft flying through. Blasting this releases a capsule that, if collected, gives you a massive firepower boost. Sure, it's just auto-fire, but it helps you dish out a lot of damage, even compared to what the best joysticks of the time could offer with their own hardware auto-fire features. Now there's only one real nitpick I have with Warhawk on the Commodore 64, and it's the way the sound is handled. Because there is an absolutely cracking Rob Hubbard title theme in place, and while this is kept in-game, your firing sounds and some of the other explosions can knock it out, and most of the times it kind of ruins the main melody by forcing that to be replaced by sounds that kind of impacts the vibe quite a bit. Overall though, in its original Commodore 64 incarnation, Warhawk offers smooth visuals, well-defined objects, and lots of frenetic, zapping action to enjoy. Now we're going to have a little sidestep and look at one of its original 8-bit ports, and that is to the Atari 8-bits. This one was also handled by the Proteus team, so I feel it's got a legitimate connection there. Now there are a few differences between it and the Commodore 64 original, which make it better or worse in various ways. So let's go. The big difference is that things do feel a little cramped, visually. Part of that is the smaller screen spaces. To start with, the Ataris have a slightly smaller vertical resolution than the Commodore, but also the gameplay area doesn't extend under the score panel, so it feels a little squished in. Now, is it minor? Yeah, I'll admit it is. But I did find it made things a little more challenging, at least when I started playing the game. Everything else you'd expect is here. A cracking pokey rearrangement of Rob Hubbard's soundtrack, some solid background visuals, and a great use of the Atari's wider colour palette. The sprites or player objects for the enemies are a bit of a letdown, though the Warhawk itself does use sub-tricks to give it multiple colours. The enemies are drawn in a single colour. I guess with the amount of objects being thrown around here, using the same tricks that gave your Warhawk extra colour might have eaten up a lot more CPU time to do it for the enemies as well. Now, there's one other letdown. It's a bit of a minor one at least, and that's in the levels. Because this was, the original team doing the version, I would have expected a one-to-one translation of the levels. But there has been some reworking done, and this results in them generally having way more targets to take out, meaning earning that base destruction bonus is quite a bit harder in comparison. In fact, even when I got the upgraded blasters, the auto-fire power later in the game, I just couldn't do it at all here on the Atari. And there's also one other disappointment in that the music is only constrained to the title screen. Even though it could have been handled in-game probably better than on the C64 because the Pokey has an extra sound channel available, it would have been neat to have just one dedicated SFX and the music running over the other three. Again, this isn't a deal breaker. All the sounds really do add to the vibe, to the overall experience here, but I would have loved to have had the music to just be that one step above the C64 original. Now, is it a bummer? Maybe a little, but it doesn't really get in the way of a serious frenetic blast, which is what the Atari version of Warhawk manages to offer. But now, for the main event, Warhawk for the SpecNext. If I was being reductive and rather boring at that, I'd call this a reimagining of the original, much like that created as a homebrew release for the Nintendo DS. Also worth checking out if you want some blasting action on the go and have the means to do so. Even though it's still slight, there's a little more to the story here compared to the original releases, as it takes place several hundred years after those. Once again, there's another threat to the galaxy, and you've got to take them on with the newest version of the Warhawk fighter. This time around, there's 20 levels to blast from. Yes, that's more than double of the originals, and it sets things up for a very old school style challenge. It also takes some serious advantage of the Next's capabilities, especially with how many sprites and objects are being thrown about on screen at a time. A feat which is even more impressive when you consider this was built around an earlier version of the Next's core, and that allowed for fewer sprites on screen than the one in the production machines. This results in things feeling far more frantic than its counterparts on both the Commodore 64 and Atari 8-bits. To go with this are a few more surprises. The first comes in the expanded energy levels of the ship, though once again, there are no invincibility frames here, so careful piloting and blasting is as necessary as ever to make sure you can get to the end of each stage intact. Once again, the auto-fire upgrade is available once you're a few weapons in, and this time, it's not time limited. Instead, it's lost once you've taken a bunch of damage from enemies or enemy fire. There's one extra feature though. If you don't have the auto-fire upgrade, holding down fire for a few seconds until your ship indicator on the sidebar turns red unleashes a supercharged shot. One which is handy for not only clearing out multiple ground targets in a single burst, but also for dishing out plenty of damage to larger enemies. Both of these upgrades are critical when you get to the end of the stage. Instead of the waves of popcorn enemies offered in the original versions, you'll be facing up against some nasty boss enemies. Learning their attack patterns and finding their weak spots, which results in them flashing when hit, is important for the sake of survival, as being trapped in a battle of attrition against them will always go badly. Well, at least it did in my own experiences playing. Warhawk also offers a couple of quality of life features in its SpecNext incarnation, which I adore. I mean, seriously, I adore them so much. The first, high score saving, which is a perfect addition to the game, at least for this modern day and age. Having a permanent storage medium to hand on a machine like the Next is incredible, thanks to the SD card, so being able to save your high scores really is great for coming back and seeing how you're improving over long-term play. The second is that you can start a new game from any of the levels you've reached. It's a great addition for training purposes in particular, as being able to jump right to the stage which is giving you grief without having to play through the rest of the game is very, very handy. Man, I wish more shmups had that as an option. It's just so handy when you've only got a limited time to play a game and you want to get some practice in. Though, hopefully I'm not alone with that feeling. But let's touch on those visuals again. I really love the details used in the sprites and backgrounds here. There are some measured colour choices used in order to make sure everything is clear and distinct, whether that's the enemies, their bullets, or the hazards. The 20 levels are also grouped into worlds, each world having 2 levels to fight through, and each of them is presented with their own theming, and that helps them stick out as well. Especially when you look at something like the gothic-themed levels of Grimhaven, the third world you'll fight through. It should be no surprise to say the soundtrack has a great rearrangement of Hubbard's theme, alongside some additional ones when fighting bosses and whatnot. Even better, it plays in-game and it doesn't clash with the sound effects like it does on the C64. A great improvement all round. It really rounds up the experience here and it helps bring that arcade at home vibe to life, which is really something I think that's important to the core of the Warhawk experience. Warhawk on the SpecNext really takes this classic and pushes it up to the next level, as you'd expect for what the extra features of the Next offers. So to put it rather simply, Warhawk in any of its incarnations is a fantastic shooter and a cracking arcade tribute to boot. Both the Commodore 64 original and Atari 8-bit versions take great advantage of their respective platforms' capabilities to deliver some frenetic, challenging action with clear visuals and a fantastic soundtrack. The controls are tight and they don't get in the way of the action, which is paramount for making a solid arcade-style shooter. Though I don't like the redesigned levels on the Atari that much, because they make it much tougher to get that base destruction bonus, I still found myself having a blast, enjoying multiple runs on the game, even after I'd recorded all the footage I needed to put this video together. As fantastic as both of those versions are though, the reimagining here for the SpecNext truly turns things up to the next level, thanks to the machine's extra capabilities. These give you a visual feast which shows what the Next can do when programmed and pushed to its limits, even considering that it wasn't even the final version of the core it was coded for. Now, if you are skeptical about the game, and I don't blame you, skepticism is a healthy thing to have, the Next's operating system distribution does include a demo of it, so you can go and give it a whirl for yourself. As it stands for this full version of the game, currently it's only available as a digital download from Rusty Pixels' website. They have run physical copies in the past, and one was, at the time of recording, done rather recently. I'm not sure if they're going to have another plan. It's worth checking there, or in the various SpecNext groups to see if another physical run will be done. No matter, even in digital form, it's well worth the buy regardless if you're a shooter fan, as are finding down copies of the Commodore and Atari versions as well. Being a budget release, they're not that expensive to hunt down, so If that's your thing, go for it. But that's going to be all that is for this one. If you enjoyed the episode, the best way to show your appreciation is to give it a like, or even better, tell your friends. There are other ways, of course, to support the show: getting early access to upcoming episodes from Patreon, joining the episode's mailing list so you can be told without having to deal with the social vagueness of the modern internet, and all of that and more. But really, all I just want to say is to thank you all very much for watching.